And it's my pleasure to welcome to our conversation Dr. Joseph Tucker Edwards. He is an associate professor of religious studies and Africana studies at IU Indianapolis, also the associate director of the Center for the Study of Religion and American Culture. And he's on the leadership team with the Center for Africana Studies and Culture. And today, he's going to engage with us in a conversation. And well, we'll take it away. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. This is really an honor and a privilege to be with all of you this afternoon. I want to, dive right in and begin the conversation because what I'm hoping to achieve by the end of the next 40 or so minutes is that we can begin to design and imagine together what this process of community engaged research, especially in certain populations, could and should look like. And so I'm going to share my screen for the next 5 or so minutes. I have a couple of slides, and then I want to jump into a conversation with you about my work and about the next steps of this in this research and engagement. And so let me jump in with you. And as I share this screen, I wanted to kind of just introduce myself as a scholar of Black religion and a community engaged scholar that has been thinking and doing work at the intersection of the Black body and cultural trauma for the last 10 to 12 years here at IU Indianapolis and IUPUI. Part of what I wanted to do is to think along with you this kind of notion of what does it mean to handle with care both our research design and engagement, but also the larger projects that we are dealing with and thinking about as we think through how we as a university has a relationship with the communities that we are surrounded with. And so my goals just for this first like 6 or 7 minutes, and I promise you all, I'm not going to lecture. I want to think about designing research and building community in the wake. I want to think about the limits of the modern university. I want to think of the risk of community engaged research. And then I want to end up with us having a conversation about what does it mean to define or redefining careful or care-filled research by the end of today's discussion. So I'm really excited. I wanted to start with a couple of assumptions. And so before you read what's on the screen, I wanted to kind of help you to think about what set up this conversation that I want to have with you this morning. So about 5 years ago, I began working on community embedded and engaged research, right? I was moving away from writing historical, theoretical, and critical texts that were studying the history of movements to now studying and engaging those movements and concerns in community and with community partners, and specifically here in Indianapolis. And so about 5, 6 years ago, I began that work, and I learned a number of things in the beginning of the process. So I want to tag these 3 things that I learned at the beginning of this process. I started my community engaged research work. I began with a research question rather than a research design, right? So I want y'all to understand these are some of the issues that I had as I began my community engaged or community embedded scholarly career. I began with a research question rather than a research design. That was my first problem. So I want y'all to hold that. I began with a research question or a set of research questions rather than a research design. Number 2, I thought my subject position as a Black man would give me an advantage as a community embedded researcher doing research with Black men and Black communities. It didn't, right? So I started. So you got it was a problem, and then the problem was compounded by this privilege or the set of ideas that I thought that I was going to have, and then I thought working with community organizations was the same thing as working with building community with individual research participants. It wasn't, right? And so I want you all to understand that as I struggled with these 3 problems, right? I didn't really have a research design. had research questions. I over index for my identity as a Black man and as a person who was a part of the Black community, and that was a problem. And I conflated the idea that having relationships with the leaders of community organizations was the same thing or was going to provide me access and real intimacy with the individual research participants. It did not, right? And so as I have been working through these questions and concern, I was moved to the work of someone like Christina Sharp. I don't know if any of you all have read Christina Sharp's work. This is a quote from her book called In the Wake. It's amazing text. And one of the things that um, she provides for us is that she is asking for Black academics to think about what does it mean to produce legible work, to do the work that we feel like we're called to do in situations and contexts where we are drafted into the service of a larger destructive force. Often that means our disciplines, the way that we're taught to think. Often that might mean our universities and their a priori relationships with the community, and a number of other things. She says we must become under-disciplined. The work we do requires new modes and methods of research and teaching, new ways of entering and leaving the archives of slavery, and undoing the racial calculus and political arithmetic that were entrenched centuries ago, right? And so I want us to kind of focus on we must become undisciplined, right? And what does that new modes and new methods of research look like, right? So what does it mean to think differently about my research design? What does it mean to reimagine my relationship as a Black man doing research amongst other Black men and in the community, the Black community? And what might it mean to think differently about how the racial calculus and political arithmetic impacts my relationship, not only with the leaders, but with everyday folks who I am engaging and asking research questions to. And so she talks about what this might look like. She says, I am interested, therefore, in plotting and mapping and collecting the archives of the everyday of Black imminent and imminent death, and in tracking the ways that we resist, rupture, and disrupt the imminence and imminence aesthetically and materially. What I want to highlight for you all there is that in this wake work, and when she's asking us, what does it mean to plot, map, and collect the archives of the everyday, right? And what does it mean to kind of take seriously what those everyday voices mean to our research design, how those everyday voices shape the way that we engage and interact with community, and how those everyday voices ultimately move us to do work in a different fashion, right? So I know I'm moving pretty quickly, but I want us to kind of get to this question. I think wake work and the university are hard to do together, right? This is the claim that I'm making, right? That as a researcher who is trying to do what Christina Sharp calls wake work, who is trying to kind of come up with a design, who's trying to think critically about his subject position, who's trying to work with everyday folks as well as organizations, it becomes very difficult to do that, right? And I think that this happens even as the university recognize that it is limited, that the university is able to do a lot of things, but it recognizes that the very complexity of modern life requires more, not less information, more, not less participation, that we need to draw in the knowledge, the beauty, the complexity, the rigor of our community partners, not only to gain better information, but to ask better questions and to design better protocol, right? And so the university does not own or does not have the monopoly on this particular engagement, right? And so I start here. This is where I wanted to kind of lay out the problem that I faced, right? I was a community engaged researcher. I had these set of questions. I was going to talk to folks at a local community organization. I had done all the background work with the leaders of that community organization, telling them how we're going to work together, all of the great products and outputs and dissemination that we would do. And I said that I needed access to the Black men that participated in your programs, right? Notice I had not talked to any of those Black men, or had not had built any relations with them. I built relationships with the leaders of the organization. And so I showed, what you see right here is a blank Zoom screen, because as you can imagine, given that I was trying to do this wake work as the ambassador of the university, I ended up having our first focus group. And rather than having the 10 to 15 Black men who I thought were going to show up, right? What happened was that we had no Black men show up for this first focus group, right? The Zoom room was empty. I think figuratively as well as literally. And part of what began to unfold for me was what had gone wrong. What was the set of issues or problems that I needed to address? The organization was on board. The research question sounded great. I was a Black man working with another Black man doing a research project on Black men and cultural trauma. Why wasn't anyone showing up, right? And so ultimately, what happened is that one Black man entered into the Zoom room, and he asked a set of questions. How much am I going to get paid? Why are you here? What is your commitment to the Black men that are part of this community? But he said to me and my research partner, as we were finishing up the conversation, I thought that this was a risk worth taking, right? He pulled out for us that for him and for the other Black men who are part of this local community organization, that meeting and talking to university-based researchers was risky, possibly dangerous, and he overcame those risks, or began to think that he could, mitigate those risks by by coming to talk to us. And so part of what I am now asking us to think about today is, what does it look like to do this kind of engaged research by handling or thinking about what it would look like to handle this research or handle the folks that we are with. And I understand that term is a little bit problematic with a particular type of care, right? And I want us to think critically together with what that could look like, what that should look like. And so I want us to think, and we're going to think through a set of questions as we work throughout the day, right? And I'll bring these questions back up, but the next 20 or so minutes, what do you think of when you hear the phrase handle with care? What does care look like in community embedded research partnerships? What does care in these partnerships look like when engaged in larger systems? And what constitutes a community embedded research protocol that begins with repair or reparation? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I'm going to ask to put up the first question that I want to ask you all. So you all have a little bit of context about my research project. And I want to start off with a certain set of questions that I think are important. I think that the baseline assumption is that university and community research partnerships are a good thing, that they increase knowledge, that they develop engagement with community partners, and that they build legible and useful information and networks to transform the city. But I want us to think through three questions. So these are the first poll, if you could bring that one up for me, is based on a study that was done. And so if you all can just answer this, it says, according to a recent University of Louisville survey on community engaged research partnerships, what % of community partners were satisfied or very satisfied with the overall relationship with the university? So everybody, please take a quick second and do this. Thank you.
And there's a question in the chat for you if you saw
I
that.
see that.
Okay.
Yes. Um, and so I wanted to just again, this is a University of Louisville poll, and I'm going to drop in the chat in a minute where you all can find the links to the data sets that built this poll and things of that nature, and some of the nuance of this. The University of Louisville, every 2 years, I think, they do polls on with their community partners, right? And they're asking them questions about overall satisfaction and things of that nature. They have they have polls from 2015 to I think from 2009 all the way up until 2022. And so I wanted to just I don't know if anybody is willing to identify and tell me why they picked either 25% or 45%. Those seem to be the two numbers that people came up with.
I'll go, Joseph.
Yes.
I picked 25%.
Yes.
And mostly because I was thinking about scale, one. And then I was also thinking about just kind of trust and just kind of thinking about how you said one person got on the Zoom and that's just, okay, maybe there's a trust thing.
Yes.
And then also that, there's the knowledge that a lot of urban serving institutions might have a kind of a tricky relationship with the communities that they,
Good. No, I love that. And one of the things that thank you, Les, Dr. E, I appreciate that because one of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at these polls is that I was trying to look at universities that mirrored ours, right? I didn't want to look at a poll from, small liberal arts college in the middle of Iowa, right? Or University of Louisville. The other data set that I looked at was at Ohio State University, right? Does anybody else want to talk? I mean, I think that it's about urban embedded implications, but anybody else, why you chose 25 or 45%? And I'll tell you the correct answer in a second. Emilio, Dr. Robles. Oh, you're muted.
Here we go. I was just going to put in the chat, but I was just I did 45, but I was really struggling between 25 and 45 because I was trying to differentiate between the nuances of relationship versus outcomes, right? One thing could be, relationship is one thing, but what you do together and what you create with it is another. So I was trying to maybe overthink of it, but like that was certainly something that I was filtering as I was trying to create my response. So that's all I'll throw.
No, I love that. I mean, that's so important because and this is very specific because they broke it down into a lot of different perspectives and especially in the Louisville study. The Ohio State University one is a little bit different, but in the Louisville study, they broke it down. And I specifically said the overall relationship, right? That was here. And I'm gonna let I see Kathy, Dr. Ridley Merriweather, did you have something that you wanted to bring into the conversation? Because I want to bring folks in. I like the notion of, so Les is talking about context. Emilio is kind of highlighting for us, the different components that may have impacted satisfaction. And Dr. Kathy, what are you thinking?
I also said 25%.
Okay.
And similar to Emilio, it's based on that word relationship. I don't know that universities really understand how compound a relationship is. So you can be very engaged in this particular study or whatever that you're doing with them. We might be going there and talking to them or whatever, but are we available when they have questions on different subjects? Are we just looking at the entire entity that should be a relationship rather than just simply fulfilling the components of whatever our immediate promise is to them for this particular time or event?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I definitely think that this notion of relationship, this idea of that term is really important. Now, I'm gonna surprise you all because the response to this first and the Ohio and this is the University of Louisville poll was 75%. I was shocked. I was blown away because I agree with all you. I thought it was going to be like 4%, 5%. Now let me give some context, and this is what I want. This is what I want us to think about together today, because I think that this is very interesting. One of the things that the University of Louisville, in their data analysis and response said, that the vast majority of people who responded were the leaders of the community organizations, right? And so part of what I still think I'm working through right here is, how do we get information about the people who are actually being either engaged in the research or actually participate in the protocol more often than not, right? Not just the leaders and the board of directors of organizations, but actual participants, people who are giving blood samples, people who are being tested in the classroom, students who are sharing about their, because a lot of that information did not get back. The other thing that I think really shapes this poll, and it's unfortunate, the percentage of folks who were from Black or marginalized communities was relatively low in terms of the respondents, right? So these were all comers, right? Every relationship across the board and the University of Louisville and their community engaged office, right? So this was not just minoritized communities or marginalized communities, but it was across the board. But so not only was that the case, but the respondents that were folks of color was relatively low, right? And so that, I think, shifts in many ways what we're doing and how we're thinking. But I want you to also think that one of the things that they say is, in this study, is one of the reasons why they think that community partners say that they are satisfied with the relationship is because they want to keep the relationship continuing, right? So there's a question about, are there responses kind of predicated on the idea that they feel like that this is a relationship that they have to maintain on their own, that they have to support and keep at a certain level, and that they have to assume some of this responsibility in order to continue to get the care and the research rigor from these particular places. So that's number one. But let's go a little bit deeper, because I think that this second question helps us go a little bit deeper. I know that might be surprising for some folks. I don't know how many folks were surprised that it is saying 75% of people were satisfied or very satisfied with the overall relationship. All right, Jacqueline. And Corey, come on in, Jacqueline.
My apologies. I was just raising my hand because I too was surprised.
Oh, you were saying you were surprised. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I really have nothing to add, but thank you for creating this space for us to learn more about this.
And I mean, and it's interesting because that 75% was consistent amongst the overall, but also around the different components, right? And the next slide is gonna give us a little bit of differentiation, but that 75% was consistent. Like they were saying, their overall relationship with the university, their relationship with, certain aspects of the research team, the outcomes from the research. There was 75% was about that number of overall of satisfied or very satisfied. But if we can go to question number 2 really quickly. I know we had, I want y'all to look at this, and I think this one is really interesting. And this helps us understand. It says, which feature of the community university research collaboration was most dissatisfying for community partners? Or which feature was rated the lowest, with the lowest amount of satisfaction by community partners? So overall faculty performance, a level of trust with faculty, ability to provide feedback or input, or quality of student work or performance. I'll give you all a second to fill that out, because this helps us understand where or how community partners understand, where they can engage and what roles they can play in relationship to these projects? I know there's a couple of folks who are still thinking about logging in, but let's go. So I want someone who identified one, either level of trust with faculty or ability to provide feedback. Why do you think that those were low? And maybe what are some of your experiences that suggest that you might think those are low for other folks?
Hello, Joseph. This is Dr. Rhonda Henry. How are you?
Hey, Dr. Rhonda, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm not going to turn on my camera. I'm sorry, but I did want to support you by participating. So what I wanted to say is I chose level of trust of faculty. And one reason I chose that is because regularly in the community engaged work that I have either been a part of or seen, there are a whole lot of faculty who don't really, we're not really educated. We don't take classes on. It's not a part of our graduate level education to figure out how to deal with the community or to learn how to be respectful. That takes certain disciplines and work in certain areas and also a heart to learn. I think a lot of faculty go into communities looking to mine whatever information or relationships they can to benefit their own professional work, career, promotion, etc. Right? Because I find this with faculty working with students as well, but they don't really have an understanding of what it means to be in relationship, right? And for it to be a give and take and a collaboration in terms of not only should you get something out of it, but you should be giving something. That other person that's in that relationship with you should also be getting something. It shouldn't just be you pulling information and pulling whatever you can from them. So that's why I chose that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I mean, again, and I'll tell you all in a second, like what the response was. And I think that like the point of the matter is that there are multiple data points that are impacting this relationship. And I think that our goal here is to think about where we find hiccups or problems or roadblocks in our research design and begin to respond to them, right? So, I mean, for some of you all, it might even, the data is going to say one of these, but for some of us, we might be looking at some other aspect in order to better think through our research design and our structure. Stefan, did you have something that you wanted to add? I know I see,
Yeah, sure. I mean, I chose ability to provide feedback or input on the sense that I don't think that most researchers are just thinking about their own kind of promotion when they're doing their projects. But I think there often maybe are misalignments sometimes with what their desires for learning are and how they can, like, which was mentioned by Ron, that it was, that they might be misaligned with their interests. I guess what I'm trying to say is they may, I guess, find it where they're trying to answer a question that might be focused on a larger, greater good, and it may not have direct, tangible solutions, benefits, etc., to that community that they're working with. And so that can be like a complication of the whole research enterprise and about that idea of like, this is a relationship, and how do you provide tangible results to the community that is helping with your research.
No, I love that. I mean, and this is, I want to give you all a quote because, and I'll put all of these articles in. There is an article that was done in, I think, 2022, Journal of Higher Education and Engagement. And the number one feedback from community partners and community engaged participants, they said, we are about life-changing research. This is the quote that the researchers found. And so community partners said over and over again, like, we are not concerned with some of the procedures or the logistics that are placed on faculty. We're not necessarily concerned with all of the interim steps, but we want to know how you are going to produce research that actually changes the conditions and the quality of our life on the ground, right? And that's a real hard, I think, balance that we face as researchers, that I think that our partners are saying, we want you to go, really all out and try to help us solve and think through and engage these issues and problems that are stubborn and intractable, right? And rather than more of our research design that seems to be incremental or that is designed to meet the needs of tenure or other promotion and not necessarily respond quickly and thoughtfully to community partners. Did anybody else want to jump in on this question? Because I wanted to kind of let folks know that these were the two lowest, right? Level of trust with faculty and the ability to provide feedback or input. The lowest one was the ability to provide feedback or input. And over again, and this is in the University of Louisville study, folks were saying that they felt like the reason that they were not asked to provide feedback or input was that the project was designed to solve a problem, but not necessarily their problem, right? The project was supported by funds that had broad or larger implications, but those funds or the project design was not narrow enough to impact them, and so their feedback was either not valued or limited or minimized in some ways, right? And so they wanted to provide more feedback. They wanted to shape the research questions more. They wanted to be more actively involved in the research design, right? And Rhonda, I think that you're exactly right, because these are connected. The inability to provide feedback or input meant that though trust levels at the beginning of the project were higher, most of the research shows that by the end of most community engaged research projects, you would think the trust levels would go up. The trust levels actually go down between the faculty and the community engaged partners, right? Because there has not been consistent check-ins or consistent methods by which people can provide feedback or input on the design, the questions, and ultimately the dissemination and larger engagement that goes on. Does that make sense to folks, right? That's happening over and over again. I want to go to this last question if we can, and then I want to open it up for, and this is the last question that I have for you all, and I want y'all to think about this. It says, again, this is as identified by community partners, and this is actually from the Ohio State study that was done by Ohio State University. Which issue or concern had the greatest impact on the quality of collaborative research and partnerships? And so, is it the long history of mistrust with, abuse from the university, the power imbalance between researchers and community partners, the lack of continuity, lack of long-term commitment, or researchers exhibit cultural incompetence, or things of that nature? So I'll give you all a second to answer that, and then I'll have one person jump in if anybody wants to talk about that. But yes, I see the comments playing out. Right. And I want to just kind of, as people are putting in their thoughts, I think that it is very important that oftentimes our feedback is only coming at the end, or our feedback loops don't happen enough throughout the research design, and it only happens at the end of a research protocol, right? So we've collected all the data, collected all the samples, we've then done this, and then we ask for feedback. That means that throughout that long process, or a year or 2 years, you haven't gotten real-time feedback from the folks, right? And so I think, Nikki, you're exactly right that our feedback loops don't always work that well, right? I think that you're right, Jacqueline. Assessment is a huge aspect of research, and I think that assessment and I want us to think about what is the difference between assessment and the difference between what does it look like to actually move the project in the direction of the needs or the concerns of the community member. Because I think that we think of assessment as very different as researchers and as folks who are engaged in that particular project. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of white saviorism. Thank you. I can't pronounce that word, but that is correct. All right. I see that people have responded. I'm gonna jump in because I want to move. I'm gonna let you all know these were all rated very high in the Ohio State survey, right? So I picked like these were like the top 4 issues. But what's very interesting to me is that number 1 and number 2 were the biggest issues, right? And the surprising thing, and I'll share the Ohio State research summary with you all, is that it was the power imbalance between research and community partners that was very high, but it was the long history of mistrust and abuse from the university. In the Ohio State study opens up with this provocative claim. It said most community partners and most folks engaged in community-based education, partnerships, research collaborations cannot divorce the university and its history from any individual research protocol or researcher. Right. So if we think that we're walking into the room and that the community partner doesn't give us an advantage or a disadvantage because of who we are, who we are connected with, you're wrong, right? We are definitely disqualified, if you will, because of the long history of mistrust with or abuse from the university, right? And this was off the charts, and you all will all agree with me, and I think all y'all shake your head when I say this, when you got to communities of color and this Ohio State University thing. They said the number 1 reason for communities of color that they were dissatisfied or that they felt like it was impacting the quality of the collaborative research is that not only did they not think that they couldn't trust their current faculty member, but it was the long history of mistrust that we don't know what the research, what the university was going to do with the research once it was collected. We didn't know how they were going to treat us once we were no longer needed. We didn't know how we were participating or reinscribing certain kinds of harm and danger by agreeing to do it, even though we had seen that harm and danger historically, right? And so I was blown away by that as a notion of what and how we need to kind of think differently as it relates to our relationship to IUPUI or IUI or Indiana University. I want to open it up and we can take this question off the screen, and I want to ask you to share my other whiteboard for a second because I know time is moving really quickly. But I want folks to talk about how do you mitigate for or at least include in your research design this long problematic history of the university, right? I see, Les, you have your hand up, but I mean, because I think that this is what this particular research, this particular data is providing us, is that we've got to think about how we account for, mitigate, or respond to the long history of mistrust with IU when we are designing and thinking through these research protocol. How do people do that? Go ahead, Les. I don't know if you had your hand up or you were just agreeing.
Any opportunity to disagree with you, I relish. No, I was just joking. No, I did have a question, but it might not have. It wasn't connected to what you just said, though.
Okay.
It's just a random question, so I could wait.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that. I mean, because I want people to how do we mitigate for IU as a problem? How do we account for in our research design? Because this is what that Ohio State study, and I'll send you the Ohio State study if you all don't believe. They said that the larger issue is that folks cannot separate between the two. So no matter how good your research is, right, right? Number one, people say acknowledge that it exists, right? That is that's the first thing. Like I think that's on point. I'll go to Les and Stefan, and then I want to go for folks to go look at the whiteboard for a second, and I'm gonna share my screen. Go ahead, Les.
Well, I was gonna agree with my fellow bird watcher, Dr. Kathy. The acknowledgement, and even now, when you think about how even more difficult it's going to be to acknowledge these fissures and fractures. But the other piece is, and this is something I feel like I run into. I come from the same type of neighborhood, me personally, right? And I'm not the only one. I come from the same place. But yet and still, you still kind of looked upon as someone who represents this. Right. So that's like double hurt. You know what I mean?
It is double hurt. I mean, because I think that I know that I imagine myself as exterior to the university on a number of reasons, right? Not only because the research doesn't really fully respect my methodology or something like that. The research as a Black male scholar doing work on Black communities doesn't full. So I think of myself as exterior. But when the Black man at that research project, when I was doing 5 years ago, came into the room and said, "Is this a risk worth taking?" He was saying, "No, man, there have been a lot of scholars that have come over here from IU, from Eskenazi, from IU Health, from, go through the list, and they've been a problem." Right. This is what, and Stefan, this is exactly where I want to get to, because if you look, I'm going to share this whiteboard with you all, and we don't have, I want to kind of, you all to look at this and look at these questions with me. You can click on the link that's in the chat for you to open it up. But one of the things that I want you all, I'm going to go here really quickly to this first question. I want us to think a little bit about is, what do you associate with the phrase or the idea "handle with care," right? Because this is the larger kind of project or question that I started with, right? I think that, Stefan, like part of that is timefulness or like timely, like, you know what I'm saying? You've got to like take time with people. And so folks you can make it big right into there. Like, I'm gonna give you all a second to do that. But if you look at these slides, I'm asking you four questions. And I want folks to just type in, engage for a second, and then we can come in, because we can think about this a little bit. The second, if you click up there where you see the pages, the second page is the second questions. What does care look like in community embedded research partnerships, right? Because a handle with care as a kind of a larger frame, it might be a little bit different as we think about it in community embedded research partnerships, right? So people think about that for a second. The third question, I want y'all to, this is what I want you all to think through as you are designing research protocol, right? What does it mean to be careful or care-filled research embedded projects, right? What does it mean to handle with care? What does it mean just in a generic university embedded project? But this question number 3 is asking, what does care in these partnerships look like when engaged in systems and cities where there has been a long history of mistrust and abuse, right? Because I think care has to look different based on the history of IUPUI in Indiana Avenue. I'm dealing with Black communities here in Ransom Place. I've got to create a protocol that's very different than maybe a Black community in Noblesville or Fishers, or a white community down here in Hallville, right? We've got to be able to kind of name that. And then the last thing, or the last question that I wanted you all to think through with me, informed consent. I might put that, like, write that in. On the 4th page, I am proposing. This is my proposal, and I want y'all to. And I want feedback now, because people are writing and thinking, and I'll look through these slides. I'm proposing that what constitutes a community embedded research protocol that begins with repair and reparations, right? I want to think. I think that we have convinced ourselves that doing research with these community partners is the reparation. And I think that's wrong. We think I'm bringing all of my knowledge, all the resources of the university. That's my repair, right? I think we've got to think a little bit more nuance and a little bit more with a little bit greater degree of rigor when we think about what does that repair look like in order to create the conditions where we could then start a research protocol, right? Does that make sense to folks?
And this is a time for me to note that it is about 10 till the hour.
Yes.
And we are in the middle of a very engaging conversation, but we recognize that some folks may need to head off to get prepared for their top of the hour meeting. So I want to take a pause and officially thank Dr. Joseph Tucker Edmonds for engaging us in this very interesting conversation, but also say, if you have to leave, we understand, but if you want to hang on, we're just going to continue this conversation for a little bit. You'll get a follow-up email with all the promised links, and you're still welcome to add information to this beyond you have the link to the whiteboard, so you don't have to stop as of right now. So
yeah, please don't stop. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm going to drop all, before people drop off, I'm going to drop some of the links to the resources, and I also will share those. Wait, hold on, with the office there, so those will be sent out to you. But I really want you all to go back and think with me about the data that was collected. Let me see. I think I just hit that in there. Oh, I went over my limit. Hold on. They said I had too many letters in here. Hold on. All right, let's hit those two in. That's the Ohio State University report. This is the other report that talks about we are about life-changing research. If folks could jump in and talk a little bit about what does it mean to do care-filled research, and what do you have examples or ideas that could play out in a particular way? Here's the other. Oh man, they're not letting me. Okay, hold on. I'll just do it like that. All right. The other ideas or protocol that work for you or that have worked for you in the past.
So this is the time to jump on with your camera on. Certainly
the camera on,
your mic, so we could just hear and have a conversation. Things that you're wondering about.
Yeah.
Could I share something? Although I don't have my camera on, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just want to say that kind of that point that you made right before we kind of paused to transition was so powerful and landed so beautifully. So first of all, thank you for that. And kind of the way that we're orienting ourselves on the front end, that our mere presence is not rehabilitating relationships or the reparations, et cetera, but instead, how are we going to really build that in? I will actually share kind of a lesson that I've learned ever so briefly.
Okay.
Had an opportunity to do some really great community partnership work. The way that the relationships were arranged between myself and a state agency and then the folks doing the work on the ground left a lot of the decision-making up to the state agency on the back end of the research being complete. So we got some really great results. Our intention as a research team and as a peer-informed and peer-led project was always to kind of close that circle and bring it back to the ground and be in the community to talk about what we found and to highlight and center the work that they were doing. That was the foundation of the research we were doing. And the agency we were working with didn't, for reasons beyond our work, right? Because there's the politics of everything going on, didn't want to see that happen. And unfortunately, because of the way that the original agreement had been structured, I was really kind of left with my hands tied. And so that was a difficult lesson to learn. It's not something that I'll find myself in that position ever again. I want to make sure that that as a researcher, I'm positioned to engage in peer-led and peer-constructed work across the research experience, and that on the back end, we're in a position to be right back out there in the agencies, in the streets, in the community, embedding what we're doing in those spaces, right? That ownership remains with the people that structured and generated the work to begin with, and not somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that's really helpful for me. I mean, I want to put that on one of the boards. I don't know what it means to like kind of really constitute shared ownership of the project, of the products, and of the dissemination, right? You know, like what is that? What is that? Because I mean, we got the project where we're saying we're going to own the design, or who owns the design. We then have these results, or these that like who gets access to them and gets to use them and manipulate them, and then furthermore, like how we disseminate and then maybe optimize those are really difficult, right? I mean, one of the things that I think Les and I have talked about and some work that we're doing, and then I think that like our logic of how we pay people or compensate folks for long-term engagement with our work has to be reconsidered. If we're calling them like researchers or co-collaborators, shouldn't they be? How do we compensate them in a way that aligns with that kind of designation, right?
Absolutely.
And a $35 gift card, I don't think that's it, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that. I mean, so we've got to. I think we've got to be more creative in that world as well. I know people. Please type in. I want to be able to send this out, and I want to think with folks, as if you were thinking about things, or if anybody wants to jump in now. We got 2-3 more minutes before the hour is up. But I one of the things that I want to work on now with my project is I'm working towards trying to get feedback from actual folks who engage in research rather than the leaders of community organizations. When we send out these surveys, a lot of times it goes to the president, of that community organization, or the executive director. And that's the person that's giving us the 75% feedback, right? That we said highly satisfied or very satisfied. I wonder if the black men who came into my group, who are not the leaders of the directors of the organization, but had to go through all of my surveys and answer my questions, if they provide the feedback to the university, what would their level of satisfaction be, right? The folks, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so one of the things that I want to design is getting to that. Right. I mean, time is the elephant in the room a lot of times. How do we provide enough time for this? Doesn't care look like changing something, like, adapting, handle with kid gloves, but also I think of like when I'm handling my individual children with care, I'm also thinking about the unique and specific needs of that particular person, rather than a larger kind of methodology or model that plays out in a particular way.
And Joseph, when you and I were talking about the planning for this, I told you, it reminded me of in my field in medicine with young children and developmental issues, that one of the phrases that comes up from people with disabilities when we talk about research is nothing about us without us, because it's very clear from their standpoint that what questions are you asking? Do they matter to me? What are you trying to say about my disability? And so if you're not asking the question that, as you were saying earlier, that matters to me, that may be an issue. And I'm hearing a theme from comments too about the real importance and value of developing the relationship, to be able to ask those questions and to have a partnership around what does this look like, so we can bring our resources around the inquiry and discovery, but that makes sense to the community, to those partners.
So, I mean, anybody, I mean, I love that. I mean, anybody that's out there that's doing this, thank you everyone for who showed up. It was great talking and engaging and thinking through. Folks that are doing this, I'm looking for folks who want to work on and think through how we can better create models, right? Because I think we want to be able to give some folks around campus different models that they could use before they start, so they're not jumping in and recreating the logics or the problems that we've already been through. I also think we've got to study more of these projects and be less convinced that they are satisfied, and like digging deeper into how we could do it better. How does handling with care, or researching in the wake, as Christina Sharp offers, force us to imagine new models and new methods that are outside of what we had previously done. So if anybody's interested, please reach out to me, because I'm going to be trying to start some work to do these longer projects and really get this information about folks that we're working with across the schools and across the city.
And I would add that given the number of people that have stayed until the very end, even though they may have to go somewhere else, that there might be a lot of interest in this. And maybe you and I should talk about maybe offering some other opportunity to have a more detailed discussion about some of these questions, because maybe there'd be interest in that. So
right. Yeah.
Let's pursue that.
Definitely. I would love to do that. Thank you, Stefan, for coming in. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. I mean, if you all have thoughts and you're having problems writing them on the sticky notes, please just drop them in the chat before you roll out. We'll be here for the next 10 or 15 minutes for folks who want to just drop something. And I'm gonna try to pull these all together, and then we'll be able to share them more broadly. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Who's ever writing that? Being able to walk away is very hard. And I think that this is the transactional nature of these relationships make it very hard to walk away, because we provide so many resources, right? And so many opportunities for community partners, that walking away sometimes is felt like that will lead to them not being able to then reconnect with other research projects on campus or other folks. And so we've got to be able to say that there won't be retribution for walking away, or there won't be, that it should be based on what's comfortable and best fit for your community partners and for the people that we're studying with. I love this though. This is good. This is very helpful for me. And like I said, I'll be able to get all of this out to you all so that we can kind of think through and imagine some next steps and what this might look like for the broader campus.